The political climate in America had never been more divided, and the cultural war between conservatives and liberals had reached every corner of society, including the arts. So when popular liberal musician Evan Brooks, known for his progressive views and viral rants against the right, threw down an unexpected challenge to Karoline Leavitt, the current White House press secretary, no one saw it coming. Evan had built his brand on calling out conservatives, using his sharp wit and musical talents to make his points. A frequent guest on late-night talk shows, he'd made a name for himself by mocking Republican figures in his satirical songs. So when Karoline Leavitt, under President Donald Trump's administration, made a statement about the importance of culture and tradition in American values, he saw an opportunity to strike. One evening, during a live stream to his millions of followers, Evan smirked into the camera, his fingers casually gliding over the grand piano in his New York apartment. "You know," he said, playing a few jazzy chords, "I find it hilarious when conservatives talk about culture. I mean, does anyone on that side actually have any real artistic talent? Let's be real. They talk about tradition, but can they even tell the difference between Chopin and Beethoven?" The chat lit up with laughing emojis and snarky comments from his fans. "In fact, let's make it interesting," Evan continued, his tone turning mischievous. "Karoline Leavitt, our dear press secretary, since you love talking about tradition and values, why don't you come on my show and play a little tune for us? Show us what you got, Miss Patriot." The audience exploded. Within minutes, the clip was trending on X, TikTok, and YouTube, with the hashtag Karoline Plays or Stays Quiet leading the charge. News outlets picked up the challenge, framing it as a cultural showdown between the liberal elite and the conservative establishment. At first, no one expected Karoline to respond. A press secretary's job was to handle communications, not engage in public piano duels with celebrities. But then, something unexpected happened. Karoline Leavitt, never one to back down from a challenge, took to social media. With a confident smile and a hint of amusement in her voice, she posted a short video. "Evan Brooks, I see your challenge. How about we make this fun? One night, one stage, and let's see who really understands culture." The internet lost its mind. Would Karoline actually go through with it? Could she even play the piano? And more importantly, what if she was good? As soon as Karoline Leavitt's video response went live, social media exploded. Pundits, influencers, and everyday users debated the challenge with a mix of excitement, skepticism, and pure entertainment. "There's no way she can actually play. She's bluffing. This is just conservative grandstanding. What if she's secretly a prodigy? Now that would be funny." The buzz was so loud that even mainstream media outlets picked up the story. CNN hosted a debate between a liberal arts professor and a conservative commentator about the importance of the arts in politics. Fox News celebrated Karoline's willingness to engage in cultural discourse, while the New York Times ran a think piece titled "Piano Politics: What the Leavitt Brooks Challenge Means for America's Culture War." But the real shock came when Evan Brooks responded. He wasn't backing down. "All right, Karoline," he said in a follow-up video, grinning as he played a fast, complex jazz riff on his piano. "If you're serious, let's do this. I'll rent out Lincoln Hall in New York. 1 week from today. We'll each take the stage and let the audience decide who's got the real talent." Karoline wasted no time. Within hours, she responded with a simple tweet. "See you there, Evan. Hope you bring your A game. Musical keyboard #culture matters." The internet officially lost its mind. And the days leading up to the event, speculation ran wild. Who would show up? Would Karoline make a fool of herself? Would she even appear? Clips from her past interviews were analyzed frame by frame, looking for any hint of musical ability. Reporters dug into her background, finding nothing to suggest she had ever played the piano professionally. Some conservatives claimed she had a hidden talent, while liberals were convinced this was a setup, an elaborate distraction from real political issues. Evan, in the meantime, took full advantage of the media frenzy. He appeared on The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon, cracking jokes about the upcoming duel. "Listen, I hope she shows up. I really do. But let's be honest, I'm gonna wipe the floor with her. I mean, this is like challenging Michael Jordan to a dunk contest when you've never even touched a basketball." The audience laughed and cheered. Evan played a dramatic, exaggerated melody on the piano, mimicking a beginner struggling through chopsticks. "I imagine this is what she's practicing right now," he said with a wink. Meanwhile, Karoline remained surprisingly quiet. Apart from her initial response, she gave no interviews, made no public comments, and didn't even acknowledge the growing speculation. Instead, she focused on her job as press secretary, cool and composed in every White House briefing. Her silence only fueled curiosity. What was she planning? Finally, the night of the showdown arrived. Lincoln Hall was packed to capacity. The audience was a mix of conservative supporters, liberal fans of Evan Brooks, and curious onlookers who just wanted to witness what was being called the most unlikely music battle in America. The stage was set. 2 grand pianos sat under the bright lights, gleaming in front of the sold-out crowd. Evan took the stage first, his signature confidence on full display. Dressed in his usual stylish yet casual attire, he flashed a grin at the audience before settling in at his piano. "All right, let's have some fun," he said, cracking his knuckles. Then, with a dramatic flourish, he began to play. His fingers danced effortlessly across the keys as he launched into a breathtaking jazz improvisation. He blended classical elements with blues, rock, and even hints of modern pop, creating a piece that was not only technically impressive but deeply expressive. The crowd clapped along, nodding to the rhythm as he performed a flawless, dynamic solo. By the time he finished, the room erupted in applause. Evan stood up, took a deep bow, and turned to the side of the stage where Karoline Leavitt waited in the shadows. "Your turn, Madam Press Secretary," he said smugly. The audience fell into an expectant hush. Karoline took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage. Wearing an elegant yet understated black dress, she carried herself with calm confidence. She didn't acknowledge the cameras, the reporters, or the skeptical glances from Evan's side of the room. Instead, she simply walked to the piano, adjusted the bench, and placed her hands on the keys. Then she began to play, and the moment she did, the entire room was stunned into silence. The moment Karoline Leavitt's fingers touched the piano, a wave of sound filled the hall, rich, elegant, and completely unexpected. She didn't fumble. She didn't hesitate. She played with the precision and confidence of someone who had spent years mastering the instrument. The melody she chose wasn't a simple tune or a patriotic song meant to pander to her bass. Instead, it was Franz Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsody No. 2, one of the most notoriously difficult piano pieces ever written. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Evan Brooks, who had been standing off to the side with his arms crossed, smirking, suddenly straightened up. His confident grin faded as he recognized the piece. It was a brutal, intricate composition, requiring lightning-fast fingers and an intimate understanding of classical technique. Yet, here was Karoline Leavitt, a political spokesperson, not a professional musician, playing it with flawless execution. Her hands glided effortlessly over the keys, hammering out the rapid staccatos and delicate arpeggios with breathtaking precision. The way she navigated the sudden shifts between delicate softness and thunderous intensity left even the classically trained musicians in the audience in awe. People were leaning forward in their seats, wide-eyed. Some exchanged looks of disbelief, while others simply watched, transfixed. A few reporters had already pulled out their phones to livestream the moment. The comments section on the online feeds went wild. "Wait, is this actually happening? No way. She can really play. Someone check on Evan, LOL." Evan was indeed frozen in place. His cocky demeanor had completely vanished, replaced by something between shock and admiration by the time Karoline reached the most famous section of the piece. The rapid-fire octaves that sent her fingers flying across the keyboard. The audience erupted in applause, mid-performance. She didn't acknowledge it. She remained fully in the music, finishing the piece with the same controlled intensity she had started with. Then, as the final note rang out and silence momentarily hung over the hall, she lifted her hands off the keys. For half a second, there was nothing but stunned quiet. And then, the room exploded. People leaped to their feet in a standing ovation, cheering and clapping so loudly that the acoustics of the hall barely contained it. Even those who had come expecting to mock her found themselves floored by what they had just witnessed. The camera zoomed in on Evan's face. He was shaking his head, half smiling, half dumbfounded. Then, to his credit, he did the only thing he could do. He started clapping. As the applause continued, Karoline finally stood, giving the audience a polite nod before turning toward Evan. She walked over to him, extended a hand, and, with the smallest of smirks, said just loud enough for the microphone to pick up, "Culture matters, doesn't it?" The crowd roared. Evan let out a breath, grinned, and shook his head before finally shaking her hand. "You win this round," he admitted, chuckling. Within minutes, clips of the performance flooded social media. The hashtags #CarolineCanPlay, #Leavitt vs. Brooks, and #CultureMatters trended across multiple platforms. Late-night talk shows scrambled to change their segments. Political commentators from both sides of the aisle chimed in. Conservatives celebrated Karoline's hidden talent, calling it a win for their movement. Liberals scrambled to process what had just happened, with some admitting, grudgingly, that she had earned their respect. Evan Brooks, to his credit, took to Twitter that night and simply posted, "I got humbled. Hats off to Karoline Leavitt. The girl can play. #respect." But the most viral post of the night came from Karoline herself. She posted a simple black and white image of a grand piano with just 3 words underneath. "Never assume talent." It amassed over 2 million likes in under an hour. By the next morning, the entire country was talking about Karoline Leavitt's piano performance. News channels ran the clip on repeat, debating its significance. Some framed it as a cultural reckoning, proof that conservatives were not as artistically void as the left often claimed. Others saw it as a harmless yet unexpected moment, showing that political figures could have hidden depths beyond their public personas. Evan Brooks, meanwhile, was still processing what had happened. The night before, he had laughed it off in front of the cameras. He had even tweeted his respect for Karoline. But privately, he felt something he wasn't used to feeling: embarrassment. He had walked into that event fully expecting to humiliate her, only to be humbled in front of the entire nation. He had challenged her out of arrogance, assuming she would fail. Instead, she had delivered one of the most jaw-dropping performances in recent memory. And it wasn't just a good performance, it was incredible. Evan knew music. He had studied it his whole life. And what Karoline had done wasn't just the result of casual lessons or natural talent. She had serious training. Years of it. But where? How? He had to find out. While social media was still exploding with reactions, journalists did what they did best: they started digging. Reporters scoured Karoline Leavitt's past, trying to find any mention of a musical background. They looked at old interviews, school records, even old personal blog posts from her college years. And then someone found it. A 2012 article from a small-town newspaper in New Hampshire. Local teen pianist stuns judges in statewide competition. The article detailed how a 16-year-old Karoline Leavitt had won first place in a New Hampshire classical piano competition. It mentioned how she had started playing at the age of 4, trained rigorously under a private instructor, and was even offered a scholarship to a prestigious music conservatory. But then, something unexpected happened. She turned it down. Instead of pursuing music professionally, Karoline chose to study politics and communications. In an old interview, she explained her decision. "I love music, and I always will, but I believe my purpose is in public service. I can't ignore that calling." The internet was floored. Conservatives hailed it as yet another example of a Republican proving the media wrong. Liberals were split. Some admitted they had unfairly underestimated her, while others doubled down, calling the whole thing a distraction from real issues. And Evan Brooks? He was more intrigued than ever. 2 days after the performance, Evan did something no one expected. He reached out to Karoline privately. Instead of mocking her or making another public challenge, he sent her a direct message. "I misjudged you. That was incredible. Would you ever be open to talking? Music to music. No politics." To his surprise, she responded within the hour. "Meet me at the Blue Note in NYC. Saturday night. No cameras. Just music." Evan blinked at his phone. Was this actually happening? He had started this whole thing as a joke, a way to embarrass a conservative figure in front of his audience. And now it had led to something completely unexpected, a real conversation, a real connection, and maybe, just maybe, a collaboration. Saturday night, the Blue Note, one of the most famous jazz clubs in New York City, was buzzing with its usual crowd of music lovers. Unlike the grand spectacle at Lincoln Hall, tonight was intimate. No flashing cameras, no trending hashtags, just the raw energy of live music. Evan Brooks arrived first, adjusting his leather jacket as he took a seat at the bar. He was still trying to process the fact that Karoline Leavitt had actually agreed to meet him, not for a debate, not for a political showdown, but for music. A few minutes later, she walked in. Gone was the formal, polished look of the White House press secretary. Instead, she was dressed casually in jeans and a fitted sweater, her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. For the first time, Evan saw her not as a political figure, but simply as a person. She nodded at him as she approached. "Didn't think you'd actually show up," Evan admitted with a smirk. "Didn't think you'd actually message me," she shot back, sliding onto the bar stool next to him. They ordered drinks, whiskey for him, wine for her, and for the first time, they talked. Not about Trump. Not about politics. About music. Karoline told him about growing up in a small town in New Hampshire, how her grandmother had taught her the basics of piano before she started formal lessons. How she had spent hours practicing, dreaming of a future on stage, until she realized her heart was in public service. Evan, in turn, talked about how music had always been his escape. How he had never been interested in politics until the past few years, when he felt like he had no choice but to use his platform to speak out. Despite their ideological differences, they found common ground in one undeniable truth: music had shaped them both. As the night wore on, the club's house band wrapped up their set. The pianist, a grizzled jazz veteran named Lou, noticed Evan in the crowd and called out, "Yo, Brooks, get up here and play something for us." The crowd clapped, encouraging him. Evan laughed and waved them off until he noticed Karoline watching him with a knowing smile. "Afraid you'll get humbled again?" she teased. Evan raised an eyebrow. "All right, Miss Prodigy. How about a duet?" Karoline considered this for a moment, then shrugged. "Why not?" The crowd murmured in surprise as they made their way to the stage. The idea of a famous liberal musician and the conservative White House press secretary sitting down at a piano together was unheard of, but here they were. They exchanged a glance. "You lead," Karoline said. Evan took a deep breath, then placed his hands on the keys. He started with a soft, bluesy introduction, a slow, rolling jazz progression. Then, seamlessly, Karoline joined in. She didn't overpower him. She didn't try to compete. Instead, she matched his energy, weaving her classical precision into his improvisational style. And suddenly, it wasn't about politics anymore. It was about music. The melody soared, shifting from smooth jazz to hints of classical influence. Evan's raw, expressive playing blended perfectly with Karoline's polished technique. It was unexpected, mesmerizing, a duet that no one in the room had ever imagined witnessing. By the time they finished, the club was silent for a brief moment, then burst into wild applause. Evan leaned back, exhaling. "Damn." Karoline just smiled. "Not bad for a press secretary, huh?" Evan chuckled. "Not bad at all." By the next morning, word of their surprise duet had spread. A few people in the audience had filmed it, and clips were already making the rounds online. But this time, the reaction was different. It wasn't liberal versus conservative. It wasn't a culture war. It was just two musicians who had found a rare, genuine connection through their shared love of music. Even major media outlets changed their tone. Instead of framing it as a battle, they called it an unexpected moment of unity in an otherwise divided world. Evan Brooks and Karoline Leavitt would likely never see eye to eye on politics. But for one night, on one stage, none of that mattered. For one night, music was bigger than ideology. And for a country constantly at odds, that simple truth was something worth celebrating.